that's kind of a little bit of the background into Quilla in my job situation, the students that I'm reaching with art. And I guess I need to kind of transition into my personal inspiration, which is what a lot of this work that you see up here is. And this is just a small example. This is probably some of my better, more recent work. Most of it is in my master's. There might be one or two pieces up here that I threw in that were from my original art experience, from my CWU days. I think it was Armor of God, Infusions of the graphite one up there. I think that one is not with my master's, but I try to give you guys a variety of my work, is what my desire is up here, and just a different, I have a lot of different kind of skills. Technically, I did mention this, at Central, my specialty would have been, I guess, three-dimensional. It would have been sculpture, ceramics, plaster working, woodworking, and then mostly clay. But then, like, it's a Central teaches you in a broad sense a total fine art kind of package. And so I learned sketching, drawing, a lot of pen and ink work, a lot of painting, and then the three-dimensional. I took basically kind of more three-dimensional classes. So I guess that would have been my emphasis for my undergraduate. In my MAT, my Master's of Arts and Teaching, for this, I guess my main focus has been kind of the two-dimensional. It's really just this but a variety of mediums. I guess probably the majority would be watercolor, pen and ink, or maybe colored pencil. And I'll kind of get more specifics as I continue with that. But my inspiration specifically, I think there's probably, I have three things written here in my notes for my main inspiration. Probably my faith. I'm a Christian. Actively was raised on the Bible and read it still to this day, and just a tremendous amount of, I guess I would say, my faith, specifically regarding Christianity, has influenced and kind of permeated my life. And when I say that, it's kind of a lot of like practical things too. Like, I guess even like church on Sunday morning, pastor's talking, he says something that kind of catches my attention, I can relate to it, or I recognize a situation. Sometimes as an artist, then those thoughts are kind of kicking around in my mind, and they'll actually come out in my artwork. And I've actually, since becoming an adult, I've really tried to pay attention and kind of remember. Sometimes I take notes, actually. Sometimes I'm drawing during that church. It's pretty fun. And but it's all this kind of, I'm looking for an inspiration as an artist, and there's kind of this overlap. But as a teacher, and this is where my professional job kind of rolls over, and there's kind of this kind of combination of where just conversations with my students, or I'm breaking up a fight, or some kids being rude, throwing out racial remarks or something, and I'll intervene in those type of situations as a teacher, kind of discipline type process, and yet a lot of times there's kind of a practical lesson in a moral sense that a lot of times comes out then that I'm thinking about, that comes out in my artwork, and you'll kind of start to pick up on that. In addition to my faith, I'd probably say just reading in general, but specifically science fiction literature, movies, fantasy literature. I was actually a really poor reading student in elementary years, and yet in middle school, I read Tolkien's Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series, and it's like a whole new world opened up to me. And C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. There's actually imagery in some of these pictures up here that I remember as a child. My parents read those books to me as a child, and like seeing the cover, the artwork on some of those books is pretty seriously influenced me, and it's kind of still relevant in a lot of my artwork. So I guess I would say reading fantasy and science fiction literature, movies along those lines, those are all really powerful influencers to me too. I still read that stuff to this day, and it's really, really amazing. A lot of people don't realize this. anytime you're reading, not watching a movie, anytime you're reading, I would argue, this is kind of me as an art teacher trying to point something out, awareness for my students. Your mind is creating a picture, a mental picture. And it's actually art. You're actually creating an image in your mind, and as the artist, you actually put that down on paper or whatever. And a lot of people just miss it. They don't realize that. And that's kind of, that's what I'm really trying to actually pay attention to myself when I read that. What am I thinking of here? How am I seeing this, visualizing it? Third probably area of my inspiration would probably be, I guess I'm a symbolist or a collage type of artist where I take sometimes a whole bunch of ideas and kind of decide on each of those ideas how I'm going to visually show it, and then I combine them all together and into kind of a collage, symbolic type of work. And so that comes out a lot of my artwork, and it's kind of a really ambiguous way of, I guess it's really hard to give specific examples, but you will see when I talk about some of these individual things, how that's very real with my style. And so those are probably three areas. My faith, probably reading, specifically science fiction, fantasy literature, and then probably symbolic or collage style process. Okay. I would say my artistic strengths, technically speaking, probably come down to maybe it's that collage style. I'm pretty good at coming up with a creative way, a dynamic way of picking an image that represents something. It's probably a strength. So it's all layout. It's positive, negative space use, all those things. It's probably also color would be, and value change, not just value in the sense of shading with darks and gray values, but it's all values, the full color range. I pay a lot of attention, and I would encourage you when you have time to just look around and kind of look at some of this work up here. Feel free to get close to some of these. I really take my time on, and I guess probably the colored pencils where it's maybe, for myself, doing it, it's the most time-consuming part of my work. It's worth it to me to be layering on 5, 6, 7 different types of colors that are all mixing together for that just incredibly subtle feel that it gives. And it's a shaded area a lot of times. I mean, some it is, but a lot of times it's not just black. It's a variety. Indigo, violet. You might have black in there, but it's a whole range of stuff that I try to pay attention to. So probably color would be a strength of mine, and I try to emphasize. I try to contrast or emphasize things through leaving of white and areas of value. So a lot of my work is not just completely painted. It's actually a rare thing for most of my work. Almost always on all of my work, over probably 90%, you'll have areas of where the paper, the surface, the canvas is left bare. It's just blank in some areas. It's actually a watercolor technique where you don't paint white in watercolor painting. You leave the area, the white of the paper, and that becomes your white value. And I actually use that not just in watercolor technique, even though the watercolor is probably about half of the work up here, but I actually use that approach, that use of negative space, playing off of the positive areas in almost all of my work. Let's see. I guess line drawing. It's about at least 3 up here, and then the colored pencil is probably, it's arguable because almost all my colored pencil, I do a black outline first and then add the black value tones in as the very next step. But most of my work, I would say probably has more of a cartoonish or like a line drawing value to it, like line art, some of it, not all of it, but I have pen and ink, which is definitely that. But then a lot of the way my technique with colored pencil is that there's a black outline usually done right after the sketch, and that's almost always, most of my work fits into probably a type of line art.